I would now like to invite Mr. Zafir Hashim for the final presentation of this session.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and Anuradha is just telling me 10 minutes. So let me quickly try and get to the subject. So what I'm going to talk about is the landscape of the bunkering landscape in Sri Lanka. So the points that I'm going to really cover in this whole thing is about the bunkering infrastructure, volumes and price variations, the contribution of the industry to the national economy, also the challenges and opportunities that we are facing by the industry, and then a few points in terms of what we need to do as an industry in terms of moving forward. If you really look at it, I mean, for a location to become a bunkering hub or to be known as a location that is sort of competitive in bunkering, there are three critical factors. The first factor is that location. Location is an important factor. The second thing is the availability of fuel at the right price. And the third point is with regards to the bunkering infrastructure that is available. So if you look at the first point in terms of a location, as we all know, we are blessed in terms of Sri Lanka being strategically positioned in the main east-west shipping route. I'm not going to go into too much of detail. We all know about it. But one particular point I just want to sort of emphasize here is the opportunity that we have. We have, in the east-west shipping route, if you take the total number of vessels that's sort of traversing that path on a daily basis, we are only sort of supplying bunkers to less than 2% of these vessels. So that's the massive opportunity that we have in terms of attracting that market. The second point, in terms of availability and price, do we really have that particular fuel in Sri Lanka? Unfortunately, we don't have, because we only have a 50,000 barrel refinery at the moment, and whatever that is coming out of that refinery all goes into the retail market. Even for the retail market consumption, products are imported. So all the bunker suppliers, for their requirements, we have to import our cargoes. And that means you have an additional cost because you are paying a premium in Singapore, you have to freight it, plus you have a lot of ancillary other charges that adds up to your fuel before you keep selling. And then the final point is with regards to the infrastructure. But if you really look at the infrastructure, that's what I'm trying to highlight here. We have four main locations, four main ports in which we deliver bunkers: Colombo, Goal, Hambantota, and Trincomalee. In all these ports, we mostly deliver bunkers through barge as well as tank trucks. It's only in Hambantota we have the facility to deliver by pipeline, and that is for large quantities. In terms of the number of barges, we currently have about 8, 7 in Colombo, we have 1 in Trincomalee. If you ask me whether that is sufficient, at the moment it is enough. Even if the volumes go up by 30 to 40%, the number of barges we have in terms of handling the volume is, we have sufficient volume, sufficient barge capacity. And we have also seen the private sector who has been involved in bunkering has not been shy in terms of investing in the barge capacity. Whenever the volumes has been going up, they have invested in additional barge capacity. But the main problem is the storage. If you really look at the storage, we have 38,000 in Colombo, 70,000 in Hambantota, and 40,000 in Trincomalee. Total adds up to about 148,000. But if you look at the tank capacity in Colombo, it represents 26% of the total tank capacity. But if you look at the volume in terms of what we deliver, 75% of the volume goes out of this tank terminal of 38,200. And that's the bottleneck that we have. Yes, we have additional capacity in other ports that will develop, but Colombo port at the moment is, really congested. We don't have sufficient tank capacity. And like Manoj explained, if you have additional tank capacity, the advantage that you have is you can bring in larger ships, and then you can bring your freight rates down. Again, the whole supply chain needs to be looked at. You cannot only look at it in isolation and look at the tank farm alone. It also needs to get connected by pipeline as well as the berth. If you look at the berth in Colombo, we have the new North Pier. You can't even bring an MR-sized vessel tanker in for discharging. So even if you have the tank capacity, those peripheral sort of infrastructure also needs to get upgraded in order for us to sort of take maximum use. These are the volumes in the last 10 years. So if you really look at the volumes, it has gone up. One important point that I would like to emphasize here is that every time that we added capacity in Sri Lanka, we have seen an increase in volume. In 14-15, in Hambantota tank farm came in. In 17, 18, we saw Trincomalee coming in, but of course there was also another factor with GST in India being imposed during that year that also added to the volume. But every time we added capacity, we have seen the volumes growing, very similar to the container terminal sort of concept. But if you look at 2021, we had a bad year. That was mainly because of COVID. We saw a 43% drop in volume. But the next year, we got 24% increase in volume. But this financial year, we are estimating the volumes to increase by 5%. But if you look at the first half of the financial year, that is April to September, we are down 9%. But that is mainly because of certain Sri Lankan issues. There were three main issues that we really faced. One was the uncertainty in the country during that time. So a lot of the vessels that was calling at OPL didn't come to Sri Lanka. They actually skipped Colombo and they didn't take bunkers. The bunker suppliers also had a massive issue in terms of accessing the foreign exchange through the banking system because there was a crunch and we really couldn't access that necessary foreign exchange to be able to import our cargoes. And the third point was downgrading of the Sri Lankan credit ratings, and that impacted where a lot of the suppliers didn't want to work with Sri Lankan counterparts. So the bunker suppliers had, in the last couple of months, have worked tirelessly in terms of convincing some of these bunker suppliers to sort of start working with Sri Lankan counterparts. This is just to give a global sense in terms of what has happened compared to 21 and 22. In the first 6 months, we have seen 3% degrowth in Singapore. Fujairah is up 3%. Cochin and Mumbai is an amazing story. Volumes have really increased. So probably there are two reasons for that. One is because of the volumes that Colombo lost. And the other is probably, that's my personal view. Given the Russian-Ukraine issue, India is having some good barrels coming at good prices. So probably with that, their refineries are producing oils at a much more competitive rate. This is an important slide. So any ship owner who looks at sort of procuring cargo or procuring bunkers from Sri Lanka looks at the price differential. So generally our price differential between India, when I say India, it's mostly Cochin and Mumbai. Those are the main two ports that we compete with. The differential is between $20 to $25 between Colombo and Indian ports. Of course, certain East Coast ports are much higher than Colombo. And then between Singapore and Colombo, it's $50. But if you see what happened from about the 5th month of this year, that differential spiked to almost about $56 between India and Colombo, about $100 between Sri Lanka and India. And that's mainly because of three reasons. The tanker rates went up significantly. Where it was costing $35 to $40, it went up to almost $60 to $70. We have a supplier here who's been charging us those sort of rates. We also then also in terms of the premiums significantly increased. It was about $12 to $18, went up to as high as $40 to $50 in Singapore. Plus, the Sri Lankan credit risk issue also made us to confirm all our LCs, which added about another $10. So that's the differential that we saw. But the good thing that now what we are seeing is, with things sort of stabilizing, we are seeing that differential sort of now narrowed back to that $20 to $50. And that's why we are estimating that even though we had a degrowth of 9% in the first 6 months, probably we will catch up in the next 6 months. This is a slide in terms of just to show, where the volumes are sort of delivered. So what is on the left-hand side is the number of vessels. For example, if we deliver 100 vessels, what is the percentage of OPL deliveries and inside port deliveries? But what is on the right is the volume. So if you delivered 100 metric tons, so one is the vessel count, one is the volume. So it is in terms of where we deliver, we mostly deliver inside the port. But in terms of volume, when you really look at as to where we really deliver the volume is delivered at OPL. And that's the market that we really want to grow. Because as much as development happens inside the port, like East Container Terminal, West Container Terminal, Hambantota, the activity is increasing there, vessel calls will increase. But the greater volume for us to capture is all these vessels that's passing Sri Lanka, and there's a huge potential there. And the earlier point that I made in terms of 2022, where vessels were skipping Colombo, When you look at the percentage, you can see, it has dropped to 36% from about 45%. Yeah, these are just, I'll skip this slide in the interest of time. This is a very quick snapshot in terms of the importance of storage. If you look at Singapore, there's about 16 million metric tons of storage, plus or minus. Fujairah is about 11. We add about 150,000. The 170 that is shown here is with the floating storage. So that's the sort of difference that we have in terms of our storage capacity. And that's where I think what Manoj was also talking about, it's very important to add storage capacity. This is the contribution by the industry to the national economy. Probably this is not the best possible year to look at. This is from the central bank report. It's on the year 2021. That year, as you saw, the volumes were very low. Normally, the contribution by the petroleum industry to the national economy in terms of foreign exchange coming in is about 6 to 7%. We feel that if things go well, it can be increased to over 10%. There's also another very important factor here. So when a vessel calls outside for bunkers, it's not only that. There are also many other services that the vessel sorts of takes when they call for bunkers, and those are also valuable foreign exchange that comes into the country. Yeah, so in terms of opportunities and challenges, I spoke about the location, the developments of the port. Just on the third point, I have a sort of quick slide to sort of show in terms of this is the number of vessel calls inside the Colombo port. So this is again another great opportunity that we have. If you look at the number of vessels that we bunker as opposed to the number of vessel calls, it's less than 25%. So then also the additional capacity at Hambantota and Trinco coming in, that's an opportunity. And also a very important point is generally Sri Lanka is recognized as a trusted port in terms of buying bunkers, especially with regards to quality and quantity. Some of the challenges that we have is lack of storage, inadequate infrastructure. We also take a lot of time to sort of build capacity. If you look at the last 15 years, probably we have added 8,000 metric tons of storage at the JCT, and it almost took 15 years for us to build. And at that pace of sort of change, it's going to be very difficult for us to keep up with where the world is moving. Regulated by multiple state agencies. We are licensed by the Energy Ministry. We work under the Sri Lanka Ports Authority. We work with the customs. So there's multiple state agencies that we work with. So I think what is important is for us to get a solution. If you can work with one state agency, then the solutions becomes much faster. So that's a huge bottleneck that we have. Also the high throughput tariff. Probably the gentleman from SLP will take note of this. We have been actually, if you really look at the regional storage in Singapore is about $6 to $7, probably around that rate. In Colombo, we pay almost $10. So what we are asking as an industry is, we don't want a discount, but we need to have a competitive rate so that we have an opportunity for us to start competing with the regional ports. Then, of course, the last 2 points is with regards to the current situation in Sri Lanka, but I think over a period of time, that will hopefully get resolved. Yeah, so my final slide is with regards to what do we need to do as an industry to move forward. First and foremost, I think it's the blame is with us as industry players. We don't have a formal association, so I think that is one thing that we really need to create so that we have one voice in terms of going and meeting stakeholders and getting our problem resolved. So forming a formal association is an important point. Then, of course, fast-tracking some of the developments is an important thing. Improving our competitiveness, whether it's from the delivery, storage, or whether it's on the import side, we have to continuously sort of improve our KPIs so that we become competitive. And then the last point is what I think Simon was talking about. Beyond all this that I've been presenting is to do with fossil fuels. But the world is changing. It is getting much more complex. We are talking about LSFO and MGO. But the world is changing so much. They're talking about LNG, they're talking about methanol, they're talking about ammonia. The latest reports of IEE, the International Energy Association, is saying by 2050, when there is net zero emissions, 45% of the vessels in the world will run on ammonia. COSCO has just invested $3 billion on 24,000 TEU vessels. So there are multiple types of different fuels that's going to come. And as a country, if we don't really work, that is the private sector as well as the government, if we really don't work on a medium and a long-term base, plan, we will probably not be ready, because building some of this infrastructure for things like ammonia is going to be much more complex than building a normal tank for a fossil fuel, because the complexities involved in things like ammonia and methanol is much more complex than a simple fossil fuel tanks. Anyway, I think covered in 10 minutes. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.